So I'm here with our CTO of the EventDay team, James Harris, and we talked with Bruce about the software development lifecycle for the platform team.
Great,
Now James is going to tell us about the software development lifecycle of the EventDay team.
great. Thank you so much. Yeah, so what we do is very similar. Again, it's a very traditional cycle from gathering. Let me just go here. So again, it's all about getting what is needed in the market, and that comes from a multiple set of sources. It could come from customer requests. It can come from an executive strategic vision. It could come from support requests that are coming in. We have a support system called Freshdesk, and it could be coming through tickets of Freshdesk. And it also could be coming from our sales and account management. So we have all these different forces playing in terms of like what is needed in the market and what we should be working on. And so all that funnels into what we call a backlog. And our backlog is managed by a combination of people, but primarily our product manager, which is Avery here for the EventDay team. And so what we do in our process is to evaluate that, and we do that in multiple ways. We evaluate it yearly, and that's what we call more strategic and high-level planning that we do, and we do that in December. And that's more like a year-long kind of strategic view of what we want to do with our resources and where we want to allocate those resources. And then we break that down monthly. And so we have these monthly kind of backlog grooming exercises that we go through, and then we do that on a monthly basis. And all that kind of keeps funneling into a process that we call sprinting. And so we have a 2-week sprint cycle that we work on, that we come out of planning. And we basically run the event team in 2 weeks development cycles. And so we meet every other Friday. We kind of evaluate what we completed in the prior 2 weeks, and then we also add on work for the next 2 weeks. And so what's interesting is that when you have really big strategic milestones, like for instance, this year we were working on a big effort to bring real-time timing integration to RaceJoy with race day scoring. These are projects that may take multiple months. And so what we do is we kind of break them down, but we still kind of work on them in that 2-week increment, and we kind of work on them, but in this case, over multiple sprint cycles. And that's typically how the development phase goes. And then from there, we go into, after we get through the development, which is really important process that we go through, we do weekly kind of stand-ups where we have people like Avery and Roger and Soren and Dowan. We have these different kind of, you can think of them as sales, account management, and also product owners, or we call them stakeholders. And they're reviewing our work kind of on a weekly basis as we're going through development and kind of like, yes, no, like that, don't like that. So this kind of iterative kind of looking at stuff well before we get it into the customer's hand. And so that's kind of like a weekly process that we go through, just evaluating our development as we go. So a big part of our development cycle, though, is to really review and test and make sure that software is being done based upon our standards, based upon the quality and the patterns that we've developed, over the years for products. So that's kind of done in a couple different ways, but the primary process is what we call pull requests and code reviews, and that's a very kind of deep level view of what's happening. And again, at that point, we're kind of getting final approval, again, from those stakeholders, right? We have those product managers, we have Soren, we have Mount Down, and when it comes to the tickets system, we have people like Allison and Elizabeth. They're kind of really evaluating things and making sure that everything's good to go prior to us actually releasing it to the public. And in that light, during that what we call a testing phase, this is a really kind of interesting thing because we're dealing with apps, whereas on the platform team it's just putting out code on a website that's cloud-based. We're dealing with an application that has to actually go through very formal processes of review with both Apple and Android. So both platforms are very protective of what is considered an app and whether or not that app can be put into their app store. There's a lot of effort that's been happening over, I've been doing this for 11 years. It's been very interesting as the spectrum keeps getting tighter and tighter. There's a lot more restraints and policies that you have to go through and declare what you're doing on that phone. And so both Apple and Google have become much more restrictive over the years. And so that review process has become very interesting. So what we do on the platform, which is a little different on the EventDay side, is we take those apps and we put them in what's called a test program. And so on Apple, that's called Test Flight. And on Android, that's called basically the beta program. And they have different types of beta, closed and open. And so what happens is in that phase, we're actually inviting a larger audience of people to look at things and kind of evaluate it. And that's where we really start getting more of these sales, account managers, and other people in the company that start looking at stuff. We've even had customers that have joined our open betas and been part of kind of looking at stuff prior to us releasing it. With an app like the check-in app, which can check in on a given weekend, tens of thousands of participants on large events, it's very important that we get that testing and that quality check in before we release it to all of our customers. And so one of the reasons is, as I talked about that review process with both Google and Android and Apple, if something breaks in an app, we're 2 to 3 days, 4 days as much away from getting a fix out on that app. And it's because that review cycle takes time. It's not just us looking at it, it's also Apple and Google looking at it. And so what's very different in our world in the testing phase is that we have to be much more careful about pushing out changes. And so that's why we kind of go through this test kind of stage of deployment for the apps. And so, we've done a lot of that kind of work with check-in, tickets, mobile timing app, and so forth. With the race day scoring side of things, it's a little different. Again, it's an app that we can push out changes on very easily. We don't have as much stringent risk is a good word. Risk is a lot less with making changes and our ability to fix things if something were to go sideways. But of course, we're still going to do a lot to make sure that things are right. So in that light, what we've done over the last few years is we've created frameworks for what we call automated testing. Spent a lot of money, especially on the app side, building a whole infrastructure, and we're using products from the industry called Testum and Browser Stack. And so we've created whole test suites that we can actually run when we're ready to get close to deployment and do like a complete end-to-end automated testing of every screen, every button click, and so forth, and kind of help find any issues. And so that's something else that RunSignup is invested in, is what we call automated testing. We've also done automated testing for our race day scoring application, and we've had a whole bunch of things that we built for that to kind of just verify that the equipment is working right and that we're getting all the right reads and kind of judging whether or not a change that we've made in scoring is going to affect the next release. And so we've done a lot with building these automated test frameworks for these different applications.
And on the topic of testing, I saw you and your team out there this morning with your phones and computer out. What was going on there?
So we have a new release of, again, a big push that we're working on right now is timing integration with race day scoring and race join. So this is where timers will be able to deliver timing alerts through their app, through race joy, through their event. And so we had the whole team out there today. We're getting very close to the release, and we're just really like trying to simulate as much as possible timing maps with GPS and kind of like looking at different phones and just actually doing real road testing. It's very difficult for us to completely recreate a real race environment. We don't have timing maps, we have equipment, but we can simulate that pretty closely by using data and race day scoring. And then of course we all have our phones and GPS and we can simulate that. So we were just doing like a kind of mock simulation of races, both regular races and relay races, and that's what you saw today. Just a little bit more about our beta programs and stuff. We had a number of kind of limited betas that we've done, and that's where we can kind of hide functionality in the applications that we're releasing, so that maybe customers aren't really understanding that that's something they could do. And an example of that is like what we're doing with right now with the next release of Race Day Scoring. We're going to have this ability to do the timing integration, and only certain customers are kind of contacted by our product managers and our kind of account team to work with certain timers. Make sure that then we go from a simulated test to real world tests, but we're doing it in a very limited manner. We're like working with just a certain number of events and making sure it works well for them. Before we roll it out globally. And then finally, in terms of our development lifecycle, support is a very big part of what we do. We're very much integrated with them, so much so that, which is a little different than the platform side. You should know that on the event day side, we understand that timers that are putting on events on a Saturday and a Sunday, this is real time for them. And if something's not working, it's not something that you can wait till Monday to fix. So what does that mean? It means that our support people actually work the weekends. they're waiting for those tickets to come through from the software, directly from the software. Our ticketing system, they can actually submit tickets directly from race day scoring, directly from check-in, and just send the tickets in directly so we can see exactly what's happening in that particular moment. And what happens is our support people typically can figure it out. I would say 99% of the time, they're really good. They understand, they can see what's going on, and they can help that timer out of that kind of moment that he's just, or she's having. And so most of the time it's just under pressure, right? We all know what it's like to be under pressure, and you're in a moment, you're just not quite seeing what's going on. And then our support people are there to help them get through that moment. But every once in a while, the 1%, there is a real issue that requires maybe a developer to look at it. So RunSignup has set up an escalation where developers are also on call and available for all of our event day applications that are being used during these events. And so occasionally that escalation will happen, and that's part of our overall life cycle. And so those cases that get created from support feed into the next part of our process and comes right back to planning, because what may happen is there may be some issue that's found, and that will come in to our planning backlog for the next week, and we'll be working and figuring out, like, is it a bug? Is it just something that might be improved? And kind of like going back and planning like what the severity of it is, and deciding when to bring it back into that sprint cycle. So that's pretty much the entire feedback loop that we have. Again, there's also those other influences that come from more strategic planning about what we're building, and then also from just ongoing sales and account management, working with customers to see, like, if you had that feature, that would help me with that. And so there's a lot of different things that come into our planning, but it really also starts from things that are happening in our software that's being used every weekend, and that feedback from support.
Well, thanks, James.
Great.